Just 9 days to go until the Ohio primary election. Ahead on Face the State, the three candidates for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate are battling it out until the end. State Senator Matt Dolan, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, and businessman Bernie Moreno. Today, an extensive interview with Mr. Moreno. We'll focus on domestic and foreign policy, from security at the southern border and abortion to the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Hamas. Republican Senate candidate Bernie Moreno on the issues, now on Face the State. Thanks for joining us this Sunday morning for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. Early voting started on February 21st. Tens of thousands have already cast their early ballots, while many more wait to carry out their civic duty on Election Day, March 19th. As of March 6th, more than 163,000 voters across the state have cast their ballots, according to the Secretary of State's office. Just over 67,000 of them voted by absentee ballot. The other 96,000 voted in person at their County Board of Elections office. Keep in mind, there are 8 million registered voters in our state. Early voting runs through March 17th. Besides president, the top race on every party ballot across the state is the race for one of Ohio's U.S. Senate seats. On Democratic ballots, Senator Sherrod Brown is running for his fourth term representing Ohio. He is unopposed in the Democratic primary. On Republican ballots, three candidates are vying to be the one to challenge Brown in the November general election. The very high-profile race pits State Senator Matt Dolan, Secretary of State Frank LaRose, and businessman Bernie Moreno against each other for the Republican nomination. Political ads have been running in heavy rotation on TV, radio, and online. I wanted to delve deeper into their stances on some of the key issues in the state, the country, and the world. So I invited all of them to discuss their positions and ideas here on Face the State. The last two Sundays, I interviewed Senator Dolan and Secretary LaRose. You can watch those interviews on 10tv.com. Today, my guest is Bernie Moreno. Mr. Moreno was born in Bogota, Colombia. He became an American citizen at the age of 18. He owned a car dealership group and a blockchain technology company, and he is endorsed by former President Trump. First of all, Mr. Moreno, welcome to Face the State. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Doug.
All right, first of all, let's start off with some domestic policies. One of the big issues we've seen in the ads that are running, like I said, in heavy rotation is about border security. So as senator, what would you do? What would be the main thing that you would do to secure the southern border?
So the wrinkle in our law is the asylum law. So the asylum law says that you can claim asylum whether at a designated port of entry or otherwise. We have to change that very simple change. What we say is if you come into the country illegally, you are immediately returned and you forfeit your right for asylum for life. That shouldn't be controversial. That makes common sense. And if you come through a designated port of entry, then you wait in your prior country, whether that's Mexico or Canada, until your claim is heard. You're not just released into the country. We have to finish the wall. We have to make certain that we declare the drug cartels terrorist organizations. That allows us to go after their money. And then we're going to work with Mexico to have our military help them wipe the drug cartels out.
Now, your opponents have claimed that you have supported asylum in the past. Is that true?
Well, no, asylum is the law. So we are a country that will
amnesty. Amnesty.
No, the reality is absolutely not. We see what happens when you give amnesty, when you allow people to stay here who've broken our laws. It's not only bad for the country, it sends the wrong message, but for people like me who followed the process, it's infuriating to see this country reward those who skipped the line. The reality is both of my opponents are for full-blown amnesty. Now, one of them has changed their position since October, which is now that he's saying that you can't give people, let them stay here. And then the other one last night in Lorain County, and today in an interview, said that he wants to give those people legal status. We can't do that. You can't reward bad behavior. My position is crystal clear. If you're in this country illegally, you will be deported, period.
So what do you do about the thousands who are here already?
Well, it's millions. It's millions of people that are here already. 9.6 million have come across the border since Joe Biden's been president. We have to make certain that they're deported. We have no other choice. We spent $451 billion last year housing, feeding, and taking care of illegal migrants in this country. We can't afford to do that. Also, we have millions of people waiting in line to come to the country the legal way, the way I came in. We have to make certain that we honor the fact that they're waiting and doing it the right way.
Would you have supported the bipartisan bill that was recently in front of Congress?
No, absolutely not. I actually read the bill, believe it or not. I know most people think that's shocking that you'd actually read a bill. It was 357 pages of garbage. The reality is Joe Biden could secure the border today. He reversed every single one of President Trump's executive orders. And in that bill, every section where it had some good policies, it said, unless the secretary or president deem otherwise. In other words, it was a negotiation with somebody who's already not enforcing the laws, giving him the ability not to enforce this one.
Talk about another huge issue that's been in the campaign, but also just around the country, and that is abortion. You are pro-life, you know that. We know that. You've said that you support some federal limit on access to abortion, and I believe in the debate recently, you said you would put that access at 15 weeks. Can you explain your stance on abortion?
Yeah, I think we should have, obviously, predominantly the states make this decision, but as much as there can be a federal role, I think we look at even the most left-wing European countries. They have a standard that says after 15 weeks, there's some common sense restrictions so that we don't have elective late-term abortions in this country. Now, we have to do other things at the federal level. We have to make certain that women have access to good health care. Women have access to contraception in the same way that men do. Right now, it's very different for a woman to get contraception than a man. We should make that more equal. And then we also have to make sure adoption services are more available, that we make it less expensive to have a child and raise a child, and make certain that we're funding pregnancy centers that help women not only while they're having a baby, but afterwards as well.
Do you support any exceptions in the abortion?
Yeah, of course. What I'm saying is after 15 weeks, there's common sense restrictions. So,
but I mean, I'm talking about,
life of the mother, of course, rape and
incest,
of course, because the reality is, again, I'm saying that abortion is after 15 weeks, we're trying to restrict late-term abortions with common sense restrictions. So we're not making abortion illegal, we're not banning it. Those are the talking points of Sherrod Brown and the left. Here's what's interesting. Sherrod Brown, though, believes that abortion should be allowed all the way to the moment of birth for any reason, and voted against the Infant Born Alive Protection Act, which says in a botched abortion, the baby's not allowed to be given life-saving care. I don't think most Ohioans think that's reasonable. I think he's the extremist on this issue, and we're certainly going to highlight that in this election.
I'll be certain to ask him about that when I have the opportunity coming up. So also, the Ohio voters spoke pretty loudly in November with 57% to 43%, making the Constitution enshrining the right to reproductive health care and abortion access. Do you keep that in mind as you look at this overarching issue?
Yeah, of course. And like I said, that's why I focus on having kids less expensive, raising kids less expensive, access to health care, access to contraception. At the end of the day, the goal is to prevent unwanted pregnancies, but we also have to make certain that we are not a country that allows elective late-term abortions. I think that's where most people are. I think most Ohioans would agree with my position and disagree with Sherrod Brown's, because again, he's an extremist on this issue. I think most people don't think that for no reason you should be able to have an abortion at week 38, 39, 40. I think that's cruel, that's infanticide. I don't think most people think that's reasonable.
We've heard a lot about IVF since the Alabama Supreme Court ruling basically said that frozen embryos are human beings. First of all, do you believe frozen embryos are human beings, and then where do you stand on IVF?
Yeah, I definitely support IVF. I've had lots of family members and friends that personally are touched by being able to have kids as a result of IVF. I support any policies that encourage people to have more kids. We're not even hitting birth replacement rates in this country, which is a problem. So anything that gives families in America an incentive to have more children, I'm all in favor of that. Like I said, I've been touched by that personally. I've seen how these babies change these people's lives who've been able to have access to IVF.
And just back to the quick question, do you believe that a frozen embryo should have the rights of a human being?
Well, again, the reality is, as I said, clearly I'm in favor of IVF. I think that we want to have a birth rate in this country that keeps with replacement rates, and we got to do things that encourage people to have more babies.
Let's talk about the economy. What do you think is the biggest threat to the U.S. economy right now?
The United States government. The government spending is completely out of control. That's what's driving this debt. We have $34.2 trillion in debt. We have career politicians in D.C. that spend money, don't respect our taxpayer dollars. Right now, for every dollar we send the federal government, 44 cents is interest. Think about that for a second. That is insane. It's eventually going to break the economy. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We have to massively shrink the size of the federal government. We're going to do that, get rid of departments like the Department of Education, but we also have to grow the economy and the private sector side. That means American energy dominance, which only happens with coal, with natural gas, with oil, and nuclear. So those are the things that we got to do is a two-pronged: cut government spending and grow our economy. Unleash American energy and make certain that the regulatory environment is such that that businesses want to invest and grow here.
I'll ask you a little bit more about education in a minute that you brought up, but people are struggling with mortgages, rents, groceries, electricity, all kinds of bills right now. What can be done, I guess, in the short term, say immediately after you would take office? What would you be able to do with your colleagues there to make things more affordable for folks?
Yeah, we'll do the opposite of what Joe Biden's done. So Joe Biden took office and declared war on American energy, stopped the Keystone Pipeline. He's now recently stopped LNG exports. We have to unleash American energy. We're going to make America an energy dominant country. No other nation on earth will produce energy at the level that we do. That's going to drive the cost of everything down. The reason food prices are up is because of energy inputs that go in. We're going to get rid of all these EV mandates, EV incentives, let the markets decide. Those are the things that you do. We're going to stop incentivizing people not to work. We're paying people who can work not to work. That's ridiculous. So those are the things that we do that will help drive the cost down, because you're exactly right. This economy is not working for working class Americans, and it's not working for seniors. They're getting absolutely crushed. Credit card debt, as you mentioned, is up 50%. That is a problem for working class Americans. You see the jobs report. Jobs are up because people are getting 2 and 3 jobs. That's a challenge, because once you start creating an economy where you can't survive on one job, you create all kinds of other societal issues.
Let's talk about education a little bit. Can you repeat what you said about the Department of Education?
January 2025, we're going to take office. President Trump will be in the White House. I'm absolutely convinced of that. We're going to take the Senate back. We're going to retire Sherrod Brown. We're going to keep the House of Representatives. And by the end of next year, we're going to get rid of the Department of Education. It should never have been created. It's unconstitutional. It's 4,400 bureaucrats that are basically just laundering money for the Democrat Party. We're going to put schools in the hands of local communities and parents. Parents in local communities should make their educational decisions for their kids, not some sort of bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. that thinks they can run every school in America from Washington. That's nuts.
So we all often hear about local control. The state leaders will say local control, it goes to the school boards. So you're saying just eliminate any kind of federal oversight. There shouldn't be any kind of oversight on the education system from the federal level?
No, not at all. It's not necessary. Parents know what's best for their kids. Not to be indoctrinated, they got to be being taught math and science and critical thinking, communication, real American history. The parents are the best together in that local community to decide what's good for their kids. The federal government overreaches. You have these bureaucrats that just basically create rules and regulations that aren't what parents in every community want. We have a very diverse country. Mm-hmm. We don't need our educational system run remote control out of Washington, D.C.
A little bit of time we have left on domestic policy issues. I want to ask you about gun violence and gun control. We're seeing mass shootings all the time, gun crime here in Ohio, in Columbus. I know that you're a Second Amendment supporter, but what can be done to end or to at least cut back on gun violence that we're seeing?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to punish criminals. If you look at here in Columbus, I talk to the police officers here all the time. They arrest the same people over and over again. So these people get arrested, they commit a crime, they go in their cashless bail, and they're out the next day. They get arrested, it's a rinse and repeat. The police are massively demoralized because they feel like, what's the point of arresting these people if they're just going to have prosecutors that let them off the hook? Then you go to counties like Warren County, Claremont County, where if you commit a crime there, you're going to get punished. There's less crime. It's not that complicated. Here in Columbus and in Cleveland, huge problem. Can't get police officers. They're way down on the size of the police force. We need to reinstate the simple fact. The police are the good guys, and we have to punish criminals.
How do you keep guns out of the hands of the bad guys? I'm not talking about law-abiding citizens. I mean, obviously they have the right, but how do you keep the guns out of the hands of the bad guys?
You punish them for committing a crime. At the end of the day, if you're a criminal and you want to commit a crime, a gun law is not going to stop you because by definition, you're a criminal. You're willing to violate a law. It's just a lazy politician way to say, hey, I'm doing something about an issue is by attacking the gun. The gun isn't committing the crime. It's the person. Punish the person committing the crime, and you will stop crime from happening. It's that simple.
Mr. Moreno, just take a quick pause right here, and when we come back, we're going to get Mr. Moreno's stances on some of the big foreign policy issues of the day, including the danger Russia opposes and what America's role should be in Ukraine and Israel as conflicts continue to rage on there. Welcome back to Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. Today we're focusing on the race for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in Ohio. We've heard Bernie Moreno's positions on several of the big domestic policy issues. Now we turn to his stances on some of the key foreign policy issues. Mr. Moreno, first of all, let's talk about Russia. How dangerous is Russia to the United States?
Well, Russia's certainly a bad actor. Putin's a bad guy. There's no question about that. What we have to do is have a commander-in-chief that he actually believes is a threat to him, somebody who's strong, that he knows there's repercussions. That's why, if you notice, during the 4 years of President Donald J. Trump, Russia was in the corner. It did not invade any country, behaved as they should have been, even though, ironically, the Democrats and the media said Russia, Russia, Russia. But for 4 years, we had peace and stability in Eastern Europe, and we didn't have Russia doing any kind of bad acting. They took Crimea under Obama, and they invaded Ukraine under Biden.
People did say that President Trump kind of kowtowed to Putin, though.
Well, but think about how silly that is, because during the 4 years of Trump, Russia didn't do anything. Russia invaded Crimea under Obama and invaded Ukraine under Biden. So the reality is exactly the opposite. Putin feared Trump, understood that President Trump would stand behind his word. He looked at Biden, saw weakness, and saw what happened with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, saw what happened when Democrats like Sherrod Brown green-lighted the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, making Russia wealthier, amassed troops on the border of Ukraine. And what did Biden say? Well, if it's a minor incursion, we may, turn the other way, giving him the green light to invade Ukraine. So this entire situation rests on the lap of Joe Biden.
So speaking of Ukraine, what should be done going forward with military and financial support from the U.S. to Ukraine? We
can't be funding another endless war. We're funding a bloody stalemate that's causing the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Eastern Europeans. We got to get to a peace plan that ends the conflict, resolves it. Again, should never have happened in the first place. But the idea that we're going to send hundreds of billions of dollars to fund another endless war is not something that we can afford or we should even be doing.
Is that negotiated peace, though, the key, though? Because if you pull funding away from Ukraine and they lose and Russia takes over, and you're talking about the dangers that Russia poses, we can't let that happen either.
Well, because you're going to have a strong commander-in-chief that's going to go in there. I think President Trump gets in there in January of next year. And by the end of January, beginning of February, this thing's resolved and is done. And there's a peace settlement. It's not going to be ideal because, remember, it should never have happened. It happened because of Joe Biden's weakness. But we have to get to peace. We're not going to, nor can we afford, to spend hundreds of billions of dollars to fight another endless war in Ukraine. This is the biggest difference between myself and my opponents. Matt Dolan will tell you that the most important threat to this country is funding Ukraine. He said when he got interviewed by the Cleveland Plain Dealer that we have to stop being distracted by the dysfunction at our border to complete our obligation to Ukraine. My obligation is to the people of Ohio and the people of the United States of America. We have problems here in America that we have to solve. Let's do that, get to peace. That's what the leader of the world does. They try to pitch this as being isolationist. That's nonsense. What I'm saying is America does play a leadership role in the world, and it's to ensure peace and stability, not endless wars.
And then what should our role be then in Israel with the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza?
Well, that's a very different situation. You're talking about Israel's at the tip of the spear of the battle for Western civilization. You have terrorists that want to exterminate every Jew from the planet and then come after Americans. The money that we give Israel has a very, very specific role. It's to end Hamas. They know how to take our aid. They take our weaponry and improve it. So that's an investment, the money that we send Israel. And what we should be doing is letting them fight the way they think it should be done. What we have had since the beginning, since October 7th, Joe Biden has been meddling into Israel's military operations and telling them how to do it. We need to let them do and have the space they need to end Hamas.
Yeah, your opponents have said that you said Israel can handle it itself. Is that what you meant, or is what you're talking about now?
Well, they're very good at twisting things because they're desperate career politicians that are term limited, so desperately are looking to keep another job. They're job hunters. At the end of the day, my position on a week after October 7th was exactly what the Prime Minister's position was. Let Israel fight the war the way they want to fight it. On October 7th, the Biden administration was calling for a ceasefire. Think about how insane that is. Can you imagine if Canada was telling us to worry about not fighting back after September 11th? What would we have said to Canada? Right? Let Israel do what they need to do. Understand there will be civilian casualties. And you know whose fault that is? Hamas's fault. But what is Biden doing? He's funding both sides of the war. He's giving money to Gaza, which is obviously going to go to terrorists. He wants us now to build a port in Gaza. Our money, we need things here done in America. And he wants to help the terrorists at Gaza, which is insane.
Well, what about the innocents in Gaza, though? The people who are being, bombarded every day, and you see, on the news, they've got no food. They're hoping to get these packets that are being dropped from the sky.
Israel has done everything possible, bent over backwards to prevent civilians' casualties. All of that lies in the hands of Hamas. Hamas is responsible for every single death that's happening as a result of this conflict. Hamas needs to be terminated. It cannot exist. It cannot coexist with Israel. Israel's tried for a long time. I've been there. I've been to Israel many, many times. They have put up with things that no other nation on earth would ever put up. If Canada was bombing Cleveland, what would we say? We have to have restraint. Let's be careful. No. They have had that restraint for 75 years. And once and for all, Hamas has got to go, and the deaths are all on them. We have to be crystal clear about that.
Mr. Moreno, we're going to take one more break, and then when we come back, a final thought from Bernie Moreno on what his first year in office would look like if he ends up winning the Senate race. Stay with us. We'll be back with more of Face the State. And welcome back once again. We just have about a minute left with Mr. Moreno here to talk about his bid for the Republican nomination for a U.S. Senate. So if you win, you would obviously be a new U.S. Senator. How would you approach entering office, first of all? Would you sit back and learn a little bit or just jump right in and start working?
Well, the first thing I do is you have to hire a team. So I've committed to have 80% of my staff in D.C. be from Ohio. I want people that understand and have roots in Ohio that come back on a regular basis like me, people that are going there to serve. Certainly learn, make certain that we have people that I can lean on around different industry verticals, whether that's agriculture or banking or manufacturing. One of the things about me is I know I'm not the smartest guy in every single thing. People who think they are usually not very bright. And so really make certain that you're there to understand how the process works and you have good people to lean on. But staff is a critical thing. You have to surround yourself by really good people.
And then what would be the one big issue, first big issue that you would tackle?
We're going to tackle the border. We're going to reform the asylum laws the way I just mentioned because it's common sense. And we have to restore sovereignty in this country. We have to make it crystal clear. We want legal immigrants that benefit America, don't lower wages, people that assimilate into this country, learn English, and have a zero tolerance for illegal immigration. That's my number one issue.
Mr. Moreno, thank you so much for coming in today and for your time to share your thoughts and stances on the big issues today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Well, again, you can watch my interviews with State Senator Matt Dolan and Secretary of State Frank LaRose on 10tv.com. This interview with Mr. Moreno will post shortly after the show today. The March primary is coming up on the 19th. Get out and vote. Thank you for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30.